Going to uni with chronic illnesses is hard. Today's video is about going to university with chronic illnesses, specifically in this case cold urticaria and fibromyalgia, with touching on depression and anxiety as well, because why not? Just going to go straight into it, so it's going to be a long one. So when I was applying to universities, I disclosed my disabilities and health conditions in all my applications. I had the diagnosis of cold urticaria, depression and anxiety, with the history of chronic pain, which I did mention, but because it was undiagnosed, it was hard for them to do anything with. I'd been struggling with chronic pain for years. I don't know how many years, but I can't remember not being in pain. But I didn't have a diagnosis of why, in part because I was in Cornwall and also because I was a student, I had other things on my plate. Once I got accepted to the university that I went to, they gave me a phone call to discuss all of the disability health related things. The phone call basically went with, I see you have depression and anxiety. Is there anything we can do to help? At which point I didn't really know, because I'd never had the opportunity to have accommodations made for my health. So I listened to what he had to say about it and what he could do for me, and I was very amenable to that. We discussed the lab situation because I did pharmacology, we worked in a lab a lot. He touched on the chronic pain and said that there are stools to sit down on, and there's all sorts of like little accommodations that can be made within the lab. He wanted to ask whether I used mobility aids, which I did a little bit. He asked if anything had changed in regards to pain, whether I had a diagnosis between applying to university and going to university. I hadn't. I just tried to push it to the back of my head and not really care too much about it. Bad idea. The cold urticaria was largely ignored because he didn't really know what it was, whether it was real, whether I was just joking, and I didn't really know how it would affect me. Up until that point, my antihistamine regimen had been really good, it was working for me, and I came from a state school in Cornwall. We didn't have that much equipment, so what I was doing was very basic and it had never affected that before. So my first year, I moved north from Cornwall. I was so shocked to find the temperature in the city was higher than down south in sunny old Cornwall. Sometimes I didn't even need a coat and it was September, and I was like, this is magical. I was a very different person back then, easily pleased. My cold urticaria wasn't so much a problem when I first started. My chronic pain became worse and worse and worse. I have vivid memories of one day I was in bed, I was missing my lectures because I was in a lot of pain. I was feeling so guilty about missing this magical opportunity that I'm paying for, and they expect me to be there, but here I am missing it because of pain that we don't really know why. So is it even real at this point? Does everybody feel like this every day and I'm just not able to ignore it? I remember breathing hurting so much that day. My breathing was very shallow because I was trying to avoid the fire of a full breath. My ribs were just so painful. I couldn't move, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't sit up, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even eat. At one point I was crying and that hurt even worse, so I stopped crying pretty quick. It wasn't until I spoke to a friend of mine who also struggles with mental health problems. He told me that this thing exists called the Statement of Access. He explained that even with mental health, physical health, all of that, it's a statement that gets sent to all of your lecturers that says, this person struggles with their health. You can get various accommodations on this. So mine were, I wouldn't get penalised for missing an unassessed lab. I can have extra time in exams. I can get deadlines extended if I needed to. If my pain was really high on a particular day and was affecting my mobility, I wouldn't be stressed about running to a lecture because, oh, they're not going to let me in. They would let me in because it's not something I could help. It was in my access statement that I was trying, and I was always trying. I remember one of my lectures I turned up 59 minutes late to a 1 hour lecture. I just struggled so much getting there that it took me so long. But I didn't just want to skip it because I wanted my lecturers to know that I was serious. This was in like my first week as well. So I wanted them to know that I was serious, and I wanted the chance to explain that, look, my body was not cooperating that day. They were okay about it. One of the biggest accommodations I got was extra time in exams. I got to sit in a smaller room with extra time and stop the clock breaks so I could rest my arthritic and achy hands, and I could medicate if I needed to. And the room being smaller, it could be heated, so I wouldn't struggle with my cold urticaria that much, which was like the first sort of acknowledgement that uni gave me to cold urticaria. As everybody tells you will, I made great friends. Even if they didn't understand all of the things I had going on, they helped anyway. I fell ill one night on a club night, and instead of just being weird and awkward and super serious, they were making jokes, which was nice because it kind of ended the awkward. They'd give me the work that I missed. I wasn't missing out on too much by not being there. We all studied together for exams, which I thought was really sweet. With the brain fog and the fibro fog, so things were not going in, so we all studied together to make sure that it would work. We kind of got around that all together, and it was really nice. It's like a nice show of solidarity that we all did together. I'm so grateful and privileged that that happened to me, and if you're all watching this, thank you. Second year, I won't lie, barely remember. Pain took over most of that year. Chronic pain obviously increased. I had a really hard time with this shoulder. I could barely move it. I would just sit at my desk at night trying to do work, and my arm would be at this sort of angle, and it would hurt every time I had a bag on. It would hurt. Couldn't lift it higher than about here. It got so bad that I couldn't carry my bag around campus. One of my friends, just without really asking or needing to be asked, he just stepped in and carried it for me more often than not. I will never forget that. So if you're watching this, thanks. It was our normal, kind of, in that group, that I would struggle and they would help. It would be weird if I didn't need help. After having MRIs, the university actually listened to me. All the accommodations were basically just so much better. I had something I could write to the disabled students. God, what's it called? There's a pot of money for disabled students, and it gets given to them in the form of like actual money to pay for carers or getting to university, or you can get it in the form of software and hardware. I got that option. I received a dictaphone so I could record my lectures for when my hands were too painful to write anything. I also used the dictaphone for if I wasn't there, I could give it to a friend. I could get my lectures recorded. I also had voice to text software and some transcription software, which was also very useful. I was missing out less. That allowed me to focus on extracurricular activities. My antihistamine regime was still working, but it was getting to a point where it was starting to work less. The airway thing was starting to become a problem. Third year. My third year was a much more hands-on year. And so we were doing more practical things in the lab. I was having to work with ice a little bit more, and the pain was still getting worse. The academic year started, I think it was either the last week of September or the first week of October. I don't remember dates. And by late November, I was reliant on a wheelchair. Third year was by far the hardest year, and I don't just mean academically. So a lot of my friends from that amazing friendship group, they'd gone onto an industrial placement. That left me kind of on my own in lectures and trying to get around campus. Ended up being a bit left behind. I was late to a lot more lectures because campus was not very accessible. The isolation was real. It was a big struggle, so my depression went up, my anxiety went up, pain went up, and of course I was using my upper body more, so pain went up there, and the pain in my legs did not get better from not using them. I was just in pain but in a different place. I can actually get to the lectures. At this point I took up wheelchair basketball. Cold urticaria would act up in the sports hall. I was struggling with wheezing, so in a cold sports hall, breathing in cold air very, very quickly, very, very wheezy, and I feel like that kind of kick-started the decline of my CU management. Being more hands-on in the lab means more exposure to ice and things that had been on ice. I didn't necessarily come up in a rash, but my hands would swell up quite badly, they would itch, but I just kind of accepted it as a part of my life. I just stayed itchy, which is silly looking back, because if you've seen my vlogging with cold urticaria, fexofenadine edition, these new drugs have changed my life, and if I could have had that 2 years ago, that would have been great. My attendance sucked. Between being allergic to the cold, being in chronic pain all the time, and it just getting worse and worse and worse, using a wheelchair being relatively new to me and incredibly difficult. Anyone that says you're taking the easy option by going in a wheelchair, that's a lie. I caught up and eventually I graduated with a 2-1 BSc Honours in Pharmacology in my wheelchair. With that grade in my BSc, I was accepted to study a Masters by Research in Pharmacology, so it's less exam based, more like practical based, which is good because fibromyalgia makes my memory suck, so how I pass my exams I will never know. So I started my MRes still in my wheelchair, That is completely fine. I love my wheelchair. It's mine. I call her Betsy. My attendance was great. I worked really hard to go because I loved doing it. It was important. The content was more in depth. But with my pain getting worse, campus being even less accessible, partly due to the geography of the place, and being with a group of new people that didn't necessarily know me, I kind of felt a bit weird asking for help and asking for a push. In December, the temperature dropped. Most of January through March, I was housebound, depressed, anxious, itchy, and in pain. The pain keeping me in the house, and then when it wasn't the pain, it was the cold urticaria. If it wasn't the fibromyalgia or the cold urticaria, it was the anxiety of like, what if the pain changes, or what if the temperature changes? And then if it wasn't the fibromyalgia, cold urticaria, or anxiety, it was the depression of this is my life now. I kept up with lectures from home because they introduced lecture capture. Only half of my lectures actually put their content on the website. Only half of those had usable lecture notes, so it was a struggle. The problem with the cold worsening is push rims. They get very cold. You can't really wear gloves, like proper gloves, because it changes your grip on the wheels, and snow on wheelchairs, they just don't mix. Like trying to push through snow, you have increased resistance, so it's actually physically harder to push, and the wheels get colder, and then my hands get way more swollen. But then one snow day, I rebelled. Why wouldn't you? I was just so sick of being cooped up in the house that I went out into my back garden with my housemates and we took some rather lewd photographs. If you've ever seen the film Calendar Girls, kind of like that. I was like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, I'll only be out 5 minutes. Yeah, I was wrong. And then I had my first systemic reaction, where it wasn't quite anaphylaxis, but I was hit with fatigue, dizziness, full body itching, and wheezing. Oh, the wheezing. I was just feeling so beaten down by chronic illnesses that it was keeping me from my passions, because I'm a massive science nerd. You should know this already if you've watched my other videos where I go off on one. I was missing out on doing the thing that I was here to do, and it was really messing with me. Screw chronic illness, screw cold urticaria, I'm gonna do something fun. And then once I've proved to myself that I can, I'm gonna go and overcome my chronic illness and I'm gonna go back out there. Yeah, I think the overcoming rhetoric is very damaging to people with disabilities like myself, because then we go and do silly things like that and end up making ourselves poorly. After that, chronic pain continued to get worse. I decided to finally see my GP about it. I was given a new doctor. She is incredible. I'm so grateful and lucky to have her, because I explained everything. She looked at my notes and said, yeah, you actually do have fibromyalgia. They wrote this in the note, did they not tell you? No, they didn't. No one thought to let me know on that one. She looked at me and said, so you've been in pain for 10 years and nobody has offered you anything apart from ibuprofen, which I'm allergic to. They said, it's about time that we started you on the real drugs. So, amitriptyline. Amitriptyline gets a lot of bad press. I personally would recommend at least giving it a go. It does kind of turn you into a bit of a zombie, but it's temporary. After 3 days of being a complete zombie, I woke up and I took my first pain-free breath. Don't get me wrong, I was still in pain. I'm still in pain now. My ribs still hurt and breathing still hurts now. But that breath, I will remember that one, because every single first breath of the day moments before that had been like a truck ploughing into my chest and reminding me I was still alive, because if I was dead I wouldn't feel so much pain. But that breath was like, wow. My attendance at that point still kind of sucked, because I was still a bit of a zombie, but I was back. I could do more lectures, so it wouldn't be like a complete write-off of the day. I might miss the first lecture, but I'd be there for the second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth. While I was adjusting to the drug and waiting for the temperature to warm up, life got better. I got back on it and I completely nailed my research. It wasn't until that September that I realised how much the mask helps. If I had realised sooner, I would have done it. That would have changed my life. After my final deadline and presenting my research in December 2018, I finally graduated with my mask, with an MRes in pharmacology with a commendation. By that I mean I was so late to my graduation ceremony that they wouldn't let me in, not even to sneak in the back and watch. So I took a picture next to a sign and waited for my certificate in the post, because apparently your disabilities only matter while you are timetabled. That's my chronic illness at university story. It is difficult. It's so hard. It's so much harder than just being a healthy student. I don't think it's easy for anyone, but the chronic illness struggle definitely brings a whole host of difficulties to being at university. I wish that there had been more of a disability movement at the time. That's kind of why I'm doing this video, is anyone with chronic illnesses that is thinking about going to university, or they've just started, or they're applying, want to help. It's hard, but I'm so glad I did it, and I'm so proud of myself for getting through. It can be done, but also in the same breath, there's no shame if you didn't finish. The university institutions as a whole, they need to do better to support you. Obviously that is very blanket advice, and you know, it's not for everybody. Some people just go to university and they just realize they don't like it. Like this video, drop a comment, ask any questions, share your experiences. I would love to give those a read. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos about chronic illness, cold urticaria, mental health, cats. Ring the bell to get notified every time I post. Videos go up every Saturday at 6 PM. There is a series coming soon for Allergy Awareness Week at the end of April, so you don't want to miss that. Ring the bell. Bye.